r/askreddit. Teachers at Reddit, what is the worst case of my child can do no wrong have you seen? My first year of teaching I taught early elementary, but had to teach a single grade 7 options class where I saw the students 2x a week for 40 minutes. I had one student who didn't hand in a project and marked him accordingly. Parent-teacher night came and mom shows up. She closes the door, spends 5 minutes addressing her son's marks and asking about whether he could still hand in the project, to which I replied sure. She then spends 20 minutes telling me her son thinks I hate him and how everyone, and I mean everyone, loves her son. She went on long rambling stories about former teachers, coaches, etc, and how everyone really loves him and I just really need to spend some time with him so I would see how special he was. I finally told her I couldn't possibly hate her child because I barely knew who he was, because I spend 98% of my time teaching on the opposite side of the school. Not a smart thing to say, with the rambling stories, that we were 25 minutes into what was supposed to be a 10-minute interview. Her passive-aggressive nature and the fact that she was so high on her son was starting to irritate me. I asked her what type of reasonable solution she wanted and she told me my personality was clearly the problem. She then got up to leave but returned to tell me that though she wasn't a teacher and wouldn't tell me how to do my job and spent 5 minutes telling me all the ways I'm personally failing her child. Anyway, that was an important first year teacher moment. Never again would I let a parent treat me like that. One of my child patients spit on my face once when I asked him what got him into trouble at school. His mother was right beside him and she said nothing until I glared at her for like 5 seconds. After which she pretended to scold the child. I've wanted to get this off my chest for a while now, taught previously, but this is as a parent. Our son, who is 3, is in school. His classmate Winnie and her mom Louise are the worst people you've ever met. First, Winnie has a restrictive diet for no other reason than her parents want to try it. They will send a list of approved foods and quantities for her with the expectation that all leftovers are to be put in Tupperware and given to Winnie to take home. The food is so odd and weird that we wouldn't eat it anyway, but that's the expectation. If Winnie is at a party, Winnie must win at least 50% of the games, even if there are 20 kids. Winnie must be served first. She must have extra time when playing with children and Winnie must not be, under any circumstances, told what not to do. The kids of this class have parties and Winnie was invited twice and then not. Her mother flew off the handle and sent a nasty letter to parents about how this was unjust and her darling Winifred was crying at being left out. Her daughter has no boundaries, is unruly, rude, difficult and eats what can only be described as pre-vomit. Her mother runs a small health consulting business and will constantly try the hard sell with you. It's intrusive, invasive and really tone deaf. But she won't stop continually begging for service. She's awful. Her daughter is awful and they're always at social events. I had a student in 5th grade. He had a history of misbehavior dating back to the first week of kindergarten. He would regularly shout insults at other students, threaten them, refuse to do any work, and on several occasions, yelled at me and once threw a chair. One day, while we were taking a test, this student was talking. I quietly reminded him that it is against the rules to talk during a test, and that he needs to be quiet. He kept talking. I told him that this is his last warning, and that if he talks again he will need to go in the hall. He talked again. So I told him to go in the hall. He gets up, walks out, and on the way out says, "You're autistic," to me. I wrote him a referral and contacted the parents, explaining the situation. They didn't pick up the phone. So I sent an email, oops, and I ended the email saying that I hope we can work together to help student be successful. I received a rage-filled email back saying that my behavior is unacceptable, that I am targeting her son and I'm out to get him, and that I will be hearing from her lawyer. This woman is a cop. She went all the way to the district level to complain about me, and made up all kinds of lies about me and told the other parents. Oh, and once, after a different incident where he physically assaulted another kid, he was suspended for a day. Mommy took him to Disney World. Once I had a piano student whose mother made him take lessons, even though his heart wasn't in it. For several weeks, he'd come back with exactly the same mistakes as the week before and with no sign of improvement. I made it comfortable for him to describe weekly practice and his thoughts about taking piano lessons. He said that he had no interest in the piano or any other instrument, and that he pretended to practice to get his mother off his back. I told his mom that forcing him to take lessons was a mistake, that his heart wasn't in it and that it might turn him against music forever to persist. She said, he is a gifted student and he'd never waste practice time. I simply said that I have his best interests in mind and that he needs to pursue something he's genuinely interested in, and not be coerced into studying as a result of parental pressure. The boy gave me an appreciative hug, but his mom looked daggers at me as they walked away. I worked the school age room in a childcare center. My youngest kiddo was 5 and 11-12 was supposed to be the max age in that room. The center director had a 14-year-old who was bored at home, so she would bring her in and have her help, but instead she ran a pack of mean girls who were constantly defying my instructions and picking on the younger kids. She'd go in and out of the room whenever she felt like it, and when I brought it up to the director as a problem, she said, "Are you saying that my child is the problem? I've told her that she should be helping you and she tells me about how helpful she is and that she is constantly doing things for you. How can you complain about her? No. She's not doing those things at all. Your 14-year-old is manipulating you, like 14-year-olds do." IWS accused of slamming a door into a teenage student's face. It didn't happen. The CCTV showed it didn't happen. The door had a fire safety feature, meaning it could not be slammed. The mum still claimed her precious son would never lie, so me, cameras and physics must be wrong. Not a teacher story, but in the mold. I have 2 sons, 18 months apart. When they were about 8 and 9, maybe a little older, I took them to the Lego store, where they wanted to spend their allowance. They each had a pot of money to spend, and they carefully looked at all of the sets that they had been eyeballing for some time. But then they got together and decided that if they pooled their money, they could get one big set and each of them could build parts of it and then have it as a joint toy. They sat there and figured out how much they had and they were about $12 short, and I told them not to worry about it. I told them that I was so proud that they wisely were spending the money and working together smartly, and that I would pick up the additional leftover amount. As we were talking, we saw a friend of theirs. He was there with his mother. He walked up and said hello, and in his hands was a Lego Death Star, which, if I recall, was about $600. And oh god, was he bragging about it. His mom came over and we were chatting in front of the boys and she said something like, well, he really wants it and he emptied the dishwasher last night, so he gets a little reward. We said our goodbyes and made our way to the counter. As soon as they left, my youngest son looked at his brother, then looked at me and said, "He is a spoiled douchebag." Not a teacher, but I had a fellow student in my high school French 1 class who was a smarmy bastard with spiked blonde hair and a dung-eating grin as wide as his face. Week 1 of freshman year, I'm to work on a project with him, and we go into the hallway to work. I'm sitting there cutting out French language magazine clippings or something. He does nothing, and I try to engage this guy in conversation because I want to make a good impression. He's wearing one of those cartoony "I don't need homework, I have video games" shirts, so I try and talk to him about that. He says he plays them all day. Okay, normal so far. His favorite is Grand Theft Auto 5. Fine, I say as I focus on the task at hand. His favorite thing to do in GTA is to run over prostitutes, which he claims he does for hours on end. He also goes to the strip club, and he talks about what fun the strip club is. We are firmly in the impolite conversation TMI category, but fairly normal for GTA, right? He then explains how he pulls down his pants and has a good long masturbation session to the strippers. I freeze. Work stops. The detail on his sexual habits is in depth. A real scholarly analysis. He says when he finishes, he releases into a big blue bucket and screams to the ceiling. He keeps the blue bucket in his closet and sniffs it sometimes. Okay, we're done. Back into the classroom I go. A long series of teacher, parent, counselor and vice principal conversations occur, and everyone is justifiably appalled, but I was told no major disciplinary action was taken as the parent threatened to sue. He was reprimanded, but the parent never took baby Guy Fieri and his bucket screaming habits to the recommended counseling. Not my problem. I just transferred to another French class and pretended he didn't exist. Running onto a soccer field to scream at the referee about a call and getting banned from athletics for a year. That mother was a treat. I taught at a school in a mega affluent community. Colossally wealthy families that lived in castles. Very powerful and influential people. Most of the kids were lovely, but there were plenty of shits, and some were just downright unbelievable. It wasn't the kids' fault, mind you. They were just spoiled to the point of being devoid of common sense and reality. One particular boy, who we'll call Francis, had basically given up on school. He knew he was set for life and put zero effort into anything. His grades were so poor at one point that his parents, completely aloof and dependent upon Francis' team of au pairs, Francis called his parents by their first names, mind you, proposed buying passing grades so that Francis could move on to the next grade. Basically, Dad pulled out the checkbook and asked for the amount. Loads of Francis stories. Not a teacher but actually a student in high school. There was this kid who would bully people for exactly no reason and even went to the extent to make a kid commit suicide. The kid was really nice and also had lots of friends too. The kid who committed suicide. Just to clarify, he would even bully his family. But when the staff of the school eventually caught on to this, they called his mom and the principal talked to them in his office. I was an office aide, which means I just helped deliver papers and stuff, but I'm mostly stuck in the office where the principal's office is. His door was always open, literally. I saw the principal brought up camera records of the kid bullying people, and the mom went on to blame the principal of faking it and lying to her about her son when she clearly saw his face and transferred him to another school, and she tried to sue my principal for fraud. High school teacher here, and I happen to teach IB, International Baccalaureate, classes. Basically, kind of like AP classes in the US but towards an internationally recognized diploma program instead. Anyway, my students had an assessment that they needed to submit for their diploma. We had been working on it for months, editing and revising, etc. This one student, we'll call him Mark, never submitted anything throughout all of these months. I had sent countless emails home and to his counselor with very little response. Mark assured me, however, that he would have it done before the final submission date. On the day of the final submission, however, I get an email from him informing me that he will not be coming to school because his dog broke both of its front paws and would need to be taken care of whilst his parents were at work. He attached a photo of a Yorkie in leg braces because he said he knew I would be suspicious. Knowing that this was 100% BS, I googled Yorkie in leg braces and lo and behold, it was the second photo that came up, belonged to some animal orthopedic website. Fortunately, his mother happened to be in the building that day for some other meeting and I was able to track her down. I explained the situation, showed her the email, and her response? "Oh my goodness, that does look like our dog. I need to go right away and check on him. Lady, it's not your dog." My mom worked in special ED for public schools and one of her students was basically a vegetable. The girl had been deprived of oxygen at birth for long enough that she's not even capable of forming sentences or walking on her own. Her parents insisted she was just misunderstood and actually gifted. This mom fought tooth and nail to get her daughter into the school's gifted program even though her daughter couldn't even count to 10. Quite sad really. While I've never been a traditional teacher, I did give swimming lessons for a short time while in high school. Most of my students, and their parents, were very appreciative of how I conducted my classes, but there was one woman who seemed utterly convinced that I was doing her child a disservice. The boy in question was afraid of putting his head beneath the water, which is a common enough problem, so we had been slowly working through various ways of helping him overcome that fear. Unfortunately, every single time that his mother was nearby, she would scream about how I had no right to force her son to do anything, after which she would loudly address him as though nobody else was within earshot. "Are you okay, honey?" she'd ask. "You remember what mommy said, okay? You do not listen to that man. You are perfect, and you do not let anyone tell you otherwise. Okay? Tell me that you hear me." The poor kid would mutter his acknowledgements, then sulk near the edge of the pool until his mother finally left. The good news is that the woman would almost always disappear not long after dropping off her son, leaving me to start undoing the damage. I'd like to think that I still had a positive impact on the boy's life, but something tells me that someone had mistaken swimming lessons for a particularly wet babysitting service. TLDR, in which I take on the role of a monster in the pool. Not a teacher, but I was a volunteer for a science camp back in high school. The science camp was broken into different age groups and then each week was a different topic. This particular week I had 4th 6th graders and we were doing a physics is fun course for the week. The class had about 20 kids, all were amazing except for a set of boy-girl twins. They were so mean and hateful to each other, but when separated would uncontrollably sob and cry out for each other. The solution was to put them at the corner of a table, so close enough to each other but also a little more space to eliminate the terrible behavior. This works for 3 days, but on Wednesday we were learning about magnets. We had set a bunch of metal and metal looking objects on the table, things like paper clips, CDs, and coins, and had the kids try to pick up different things with magnet. The little boy decides to grab the CD, break it in half, and run it down his sister's arm, cause a gash that went down the length of her upper arm and even required stitches. I'm obviously mortified. I get the medic on staff and things are being handled the best they could under the circumstances. When the parents came to pick the kids up, they unleashed all hell onto me and the staff, stating their children were angels and never acted this way at home. The parents were swearing, saying they were going to sue me, and told me their son would never do that and it must have been another student and that I'm lying. That was my last day there. The camp coordinators apologized so much to me I almost felt guilty leaving, but I couldn't deal with those parents ever again. Had a parent once refute video evidence of her child striking another child because that's not what her son said happened. When I was in high school I worked in an airsoft store. We had a brick and mortar shop and an online store that we shipped internationally from. It was a pretty regular occurrence that kids would steal their parents' credit cards, order something online from us, and have it shipped to them. Most of the time we'd just have them send everything back and we'd refund it. From time to time police got involved. One time, we had a 12-year-old kid who lived about 10 minutes from our store steal his mom's credit card and order about $1,200 worth of stuff from us. Mom found out and came storming into the store with her son and all the airsoft product he had ordered. She's furious, verbally assaulting me at the counter and basically saying it's the store's fault for making our website too easy for her son to order online. She was adamant that none of this is her son's fault and that we should have better fraud detection on our website. Made me so mad I told her maybe she should discipline her kid. She then wanted to speak to my boss, the owner, who told her the exact same thing. The worst was when I called a kid's parents because he was harassing several girls and exhibiting violent behavior towards other kids in class. Had a parent-teacher conference about it with all of his teachers and the dean of students present, and in the end his dad said, "I know he's doing this but you have to understand, it isn't him. It's the devil taking over his body." This one's gonna be a hard one to type out. A few years ago, I was friends with this girl who had an older brother. At the time I was also friends with him and we would talk and get along. My friend had to go downstairs to do something so I went into her brother's room to watch him play a game for a bit. Nothing unusual as I often did this if she had to do something or I was bored and she was in the middle of something. After a few minutes he paused his game and closed the door. Now he is about 6 years older than me, so since I was younger and I didn't know what was happening I just watched him confused. Then came the inappropriate touching etc. I'd rather not go into detail as it's really not a nice memory. Needless to say I didn't sleep over like I had intended to. My mother found out about it a few years later when I finally had the confidence to tell her. I didn't know what to do after it so I just kept it to myself. My mother eventually confronted their mother about it and she went from sweet smiles to rage. She blew up at my mother screaming that I must have lied and how her sweet little boy would never do that and such a like. She went on and on for about 20 minutes before telling us to get out and cutting all contact with us. My mother didn't take it anywhere and I have never seen them since, except for the girl and the mother once on my own in a shopping center to which the daughter greeted me happily and the mother walked off. I think this fits here. Even if not, it's nice to get it off my chest. I was a TA in a kindergarten classroom and had reminded this little kid, 5M, In April, over halfway through the school year, about our rule that we only have healthy snacks at snack time, he started whining and crying about how his mom lets him have cookies whenever he wants. Anyway, the teacher steps in and mentions that he has a delicious looking apple in his lunch bag. He then gets up, throws a chair and begins to flip tables and tear the class apart while telling the teacher his mom is going to bring a gun and shoot her. At this moment a threat has been issued, so we bring in the principal. She gets there and begins an effort to talk the student down to no avail. He just keeps going on and on about how his mom has a gun and will shoot everyone at the school, and if we call the police she is going to shoot them too. The mother is then called. No answer. Of course. So we send this kid with the principal and go about our day. After school is over, the teacher, principal and I start putting together an email to the parent. The kid was in after school care, so we couldn't have a chat after school. We just hit the major points of defiance and handling his anger in a more positive manner. I get to school the next day and the teacher shows me the response. The first line read, "Why didn't you just let him have the cookie?" And it went on to say that you as educators are not doing our job if her child is getting as angry as he is. It is our job to keep him from getting mad, and we failed at it today. That day he came in and told us that mommy bought him a new Lego set. Edit. Sorry, it was snack time, not lunch time. My bad. I also had a student in kindergarten who regularly punched other students, ran around the room, and refused to do work. His mother called for a conference, and the first thing she said was that his behavior was my fault. She had him switched out of my class. Thank God. I taught 6th grade at a private school. Since we're private, we have a specific testing week every spring to assess our students. I sent home an informative sheet describing the rigid schedule we have and when our tests will be administered. Doors have to remain closed and no disruptions were allowed. A little harsh, but it's what we were told to do by administration. If anyone was late, I assured them they can make the test up, but they would have to wait in the office. This kid asked to go to the bathroom. Obviously as a teacher I can't say no. I told him he had 5 minutes until the test and he will need to be quick. Needless to say, he was not back in time, so he was sent to the office until the testing time was finished. I received a LENGTHY email that began with, "What is your issue with my child? They never read my weekly newsletters and just believe whatever their child told them when they got home instead of asking the adult for their perspective. He's an only child with a single parent. He's everything to her. I get it, but was a real tough year." Not a teacher, but I work at a school supply store and have asked this question a lot. My favorite one is about a teacher who taught 9th grade and a kid brought a pocket knife into my class and was showing it off. The resource officer, police officer in school, detained the child until his parents came, where they claimed that the teacher planted the knife on him to expel him to make the average GPA at the school higher. I was told the student had failing grades. We have this kind of meeting every year with his teachers. We know, son's name, can't do multiplication. He was a freshman in high school in pre-algebra. How he passed 3rd 8th grade is beyond me, besides teachers just passing him to get rid of him. These people had money, they had resources, they could have gotten him tutoring years ago to help him. Instead they preferred we just pass him and excuse his acting out because he refused and couldn't do the work because he didn't have the basic foundation. He couldn't do multiplication, so he couldn't do division, and it all spiraled from there. They were so calm about it, like, what's the problem with that? So what? I was floored. One student I had, 12M, was really cruel to others. He'd throw slushies, plasticine, pencils, erasers, etc. to students that had invisible disabilities such as autism. His parents would scoff off his bullying as boys being boys. Once his sister, 14F, who was an honors student with a heart of gold, stole his phone and texted people pretending to be him. Their dad was so mad she wasn't allowed to go to her sports competition, and he asked the school to continue his lecture from home on good behavior. I'd never seen more unequal expectations for the kids from the same family. The teacher put in charge of lecturing the sister handled it right. She asked the girl if her brother deserved it and then told her the next time she needed to get back at him, the teacher had plenty of ways that would be much harder to catch by the parents. One kid stole another kid's shoe. Parents came in the next morning. I told them what happened. They denied he took anything. Opened his backpack, there was the shoe. They blamed me. Me. Don't open this thread, it will just make you mad. Opens thread. Me. God damn it. First year teaching, I gave a kid detention. Kid was talking too much in class, wouldn't stop, and school policy was to give detention if a kid acted up after a verbal warning. Detention wasn't much, about 30 minutes after school, but since it was a middle school, giving after school detention means I have to contact the parents, since the kid won't be on the bus. Yes, there were other transportation options at this school. Now, he was talking to another kid, so that kid got detention too. So, throughout the day, the kid is begging me not to give him detention, but I remain firm. He broke the rules, I followed school policy, and it's my first year. I'm looking to other teachers to be a guide and they say I should stand firm. So, I call mom. Mom is fucking crazy. The kid is Indian, so she accuses me of racism, but that's not so bad. I can understand where she's coming from. That's not what makes her crazy. She then assumes that there was no way for her boy to be talking in class because he is, and I will remember this quote until the day I die, a perfect, Christ-like child. Kid was perfect, you see, so anything he did wrong, I had to have made up. Here's the worst part, I was a traveling teacher, which means I have to use other classrooms while that teacher is on plan. It sucks for both of us, but it also means I don't have a classroom phone. If I call a parent, I have to call using my cell phone. She spends the rest of the year harassing me. Kid gets a B on a test that was written for all of the 7th grade English teachers and done on a Scantron? Impossible. He needs to get an A. Kid gets in trouble in another class. Calls me to complain about how he couldn't have done anything wrong. Kid has to do homework in my class. No, that's not acceptable. I'm targeting him. Kid gets detention again. Couldn't have happened. He is perfect. He's Christ-like. I had so many 30-40 minute calls from this woman that I had to have the principal intervene because it turned into harassment. The worst part was, I really liked the kid. He was a great kid. He was just a 7th grader in a class that had all of his friends and was too big. Also, for some reason, lunch for 7th graders was at 1 PM, which was fucking lost for some dumbass reason, and his class was the one just before lunch. Kid was hungry, tired, overworked, and all of his friends were in class. I totally got it. He just couldn't disrupt class. Also, when I say talk in class, I don't mean whispering. He and his friends were pretty loud. They would interrupt me and other kids, and I was a first year teacher, too. Like, I made a lot of mistakes, especially with that class. So, I'm not exactly blameless in this scenario. Not a teacher, but definitely fits the my child can do no wrong part. There was a small town I used to live in and the mayor's son was a massive shit. One night, he got pulled over and arrested for drunk driving by the town cop. The my son is an angel mayor promptly retaliated and within the month fired the cop for some bullshit reason.